This show is brought to you by our patrons at patreon.com/ElderScrollsLorecast.
Robots Radio presents The Elder Scrolls Lorecast.
Welcome to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, a place where the Elder Scrolls community can come together to discuss the boundaries of our knowledge about the universe of the Elder Scrolls. All right, adventurers, welcome back to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I am here again at our normal time, Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on Robots Radio Twitch channel. I don't know why I phrased that funny. Twitch.tv/Robots Radio with my co-host, Lotus of Doom. It's been a wacky day. Lotus, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm refreshingly done playing Battlespire, so I'm better because now we can just talk about Battlespire as well as some of the other games.
Yeah. So for anybody who's not here during the live show, I set up, and if Lotus is streaming, he'll raid over from his stream, and then we'll continue, the show, I guess. So what starts as a Battlespire stream turns into the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. And he comes over, and as he's getting ready, I'm asking chat, like, how's he doing? How's Battlespire going? Is he suffering? And they're like, oh, yeah. And they're just like, yes, very much so. That's a good guess. Having a rough experience with Battlespire, it seems.
Yeah, it's not a smooth transition from, let's just say the series has come a long way.
Yeah, I believe it. I'm looking here at the dates on this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. But we're following up on last week's episode. We went backwards in order from the most recent game, which is Elder Scrolls Online, all the way back to Morrowind, and kind of discussing the way the games work and fundamentally are different in the way you build your characters, or you interact with quests and quest givers, or the way the stories kind of unfold. Because I think that there's something really interesting when you look at the evolution of changes. But when you go backwards through it, there's really this kind of neat progression or deprogression of the way that stuff works. And one of the things we've been noting is the complexity of things as you go backwards, which is really interesting. So we're going to be continuing this conversation. We'll be digging into the oldest games and some of the weird ones in this episode. Before I jump into that, Lotus, I shared, was it yesterday or the day before, a video of, I went to our buddy Pylon's stream from the UESP. Yes. And I just wanted to put this out there for everybody. I'm doing some of these $1,000 challenges, and what they are is it's $1,000 of advertising across the shows on the network for streamers and content creators in the community. And I'll just pop into somebody's stream on occasion while I'm streaming and challenge them to some stuff. So I popped in Pylons, and I'm like, hey buddy, you want to try to win $1,000? And he's like, sure. So I made him do things like, he had to do stuff in game. He had to try and give away money in game, which is actually more difficult. The first person he went up to, he tried to give away 10,000 gold, which is a pretty substantial sum. And the guy opened the trade window, and he was like, here, take $10,000. And he waited a second, and then the guy put 15,000 gold back to him. So he earned 5,000 gold in his first attempt to give money away. It was like, what? What is going on? So it was, and he was on a time limit too. He had to do it in like 3 minutes. So it's all up on the Robots Radio YouTube. You can watch it. He goes through some other difficulties, including eating some food that was extremely spicy. It's a really good time. He was a really good sport about it. But I'm going to be doing more of these. So I just wanted to let people know that this will be happening on stream and on the Robots Radio YouTube. And if you enjoy these kinds of things and you want to, see more of this stuff, please make sure to go to the YouTube and give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, watch the whole video. YouTube likes if you actually watch the whole video, that kind of stuff. Super fun stuff. But that said, let's move on. Let's get back into our conversation. So last week we talked about Elder Scrolls Online, and then we went back to Skyrim, and then Oblivion, and then Morrowind. And other than the big difference between the MMO side of Elder ESO and the others, they had a lot of similarities. This idea that you built a character out, you chose, the leveling of the characters was a little bit different, but in all 4 of those games, you have the same races, you have the same, but you can choose either gender. It doesn't really affect your stats. in most of them, and in fact all of them, you would follow quest lines, but of course the quest lines go from being a very easy, just like follow the breadcrumbs of like the little arrow of where you need to go, back to Morrowind, which was more of a complex, like read, paragraphs of text and try to figure out where the thing is that you need to go and find it.
Right. And no waypoint markers.
Right.
Is like, it was actually, I think, a little earlier, a couple people had mentioned during Battlespire earlier that kind of the shift point was Morrowind. So even though we didn't really originally plan this this way, that was actually probably a great way to split this as the older style and then the newer style. And Morrowind was kind of that transition game, it seemed like.
Right. It had some of those aspects of the older games, but it was graphically more like a newer game. It was built more like it's the transition into the console world is really what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the only reason I tried it originally, was because I played it on my buddy's Xbox.
Right. But we went from what was like old MS-DOS type RPG games to something that could actually work on a controller and be played on a console. And it was the first attempt to kind of bring it into that modernized kind of angle.
Right.
So this is where we'll start off then. So we basically wrapped up Morrowind. We talked about how you could kill anybody. You could completely ruin your playthrough, or at least your potential to finish the main quest line. You could basically the walled garden of something like ESO or even Skyrim is no longer there, or at least wasn't there back in the day. You could take potions and make yourself a god, or absolutely destroy your ability to do anything because you leveled up in a really stupid way, and now you're like the wimpiest hero in the world, and good luck.
It's kind of a sandbox without rules, whereas the newer things are much more a sandbox with like some rules.
It's like the difference between competing in a bowling event against like semi-pro bowlers on like, official bowling things, or going to like your kid's birthday party where they've got like the bumpers down the lane, right? Like,
kind of actually. That's actually that's a very good way of putting it. It's like, here's where you go, and it's like, you can use this whole lane. Well, no, don't go in the gutter. What are you doing? Like, come on, you're not going to be able to. You won't hit any pins if you go in the gutter. Like, so we're gonna. Here's your play area, but you can see this area too. And the old games were a little, specifically more, it was like, it's straight in the gutter if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, you can go right in the gutter. You can live in the gutter if you want.
Yeah, if that's what you want to do.
Go do it.
You.
Yeah. So let's take another step back. Where do we want to go before that? Because there's some of the weird games, then there's the mainline games. What do you think we should cover next?
Tackle the main games and then do the spin-offs, because the spin-offs get really out there.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So... yeah, we can stick with the mainline numbered Elder Scrolls games, which if we rewind again, we'll be back to Daggerfall.
Right. So we're jumping back in time from 2002 to 1996. This is a good 6 years before that.
Yeah.
Which kind of follows the pattern. This is still that same kind of 4 to 6 year iteration thing. Like.
So. The thing now, this is actually, ironically, given it all of the games, this is the one that I'm least experienced in, because during my quest of playing through all these from beginning to end, I have not started Daggerfall yet. Actually, I guess there's two others that we'll get into really off the side, but so I actually only have a cursory view of this. I've looked into it. I've seen other people play Daggerfall. Daggerfall to many is super, super beloved. It for a very long time was considered the largest video game that had ever been created. I know it was dethroned by No Man's Sky and maybe like one or two others, but it was equivalent to the size of, I believe, all of Europe.
Yeah, I have the stat here. It's 160,000 kilometers. 160,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
Like, comparatively, what the map of Skyrim,
whatever.
which would be the same map. Skyrim is something like 4 miles across or something like.
Yeah,
it's
yes.
really not that big.
It's nonsense. Now, granted, there's a lot of this is also where they get into things aren't so handcrafted in these older games. Well, specifically, Arena and Daggerfall is what we're talking about. The excessive space is a lot of procedural generation.
Mm-hmm.
So your experience might be different than somebody else's as you roam the wilderness and the game procedurally generates what's coming in front of you. So you'll get random caves and garbage here or there, with main features being more of the focus, and you travel these procedurally generated environments to get to your main locations, so to speak.
Right. Right. Real quick, Bob in chat is saying WTF is a kilometer. Lol. It's about 2/3 of a mile, so that's almost it's just under 100,000 miles.
Yes.
So yeah.
Right. So the thing is, this comes with the benefits of they don't need to handcraft every blade of grass and single tree, so you can produce much larger environments with much less effort.
And this explains why they could design a game that big with a smaller team. The team has grown over time substantially. But back in the day, back in the time of Daggerfall, they had, what, a dozen or 2 dozen developers? Something like that?
It was a small team. I mean, to be fair, it was a small team for up until relatively recently. And even in terms of nowadays, their team is much smaller than most AAA studios, from my understanding. So they've never been like a huge team. And to your point, that's exactly it. They made these enormous environments based on much smaller teams, which normally would not be able to produce that type of content quick enough. The game would be in development for 20, 30 years. You'd never get through it all.
Right.
But as a side effect of this, it came with, not that any of the games are exempt from this, but a myriad of technical issues from what I've seen, what I've experienced in setting it up and stuff, where dungeons could be completely uncompletable because it procedurally generated them wrong. You can fall through stuff, blah, 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 blah. We won't get into that. But Daggerfall to date, I think, is still the most ambitious from what I've seen of it and heard from my friends who have beaten it and stuff, where the spellcrafting was even more involved than the very elaborate spellcrafting that we were mentioning in Morrowind. There were just a myriad of skills, and this was the game that introduced, being that we're working backwards, it still had the, if you run, you get better at athletics. If you swim, you get better at if you use spears, you're better at that. Blah,
do
blah,
a
blah,
thing
blah, blah.
To upgrade it.
Yes, do a thing to upgrade a thing. So that was, for the time, I would imagine, pretty revolutionary, because normally it was just kill the thing and get said experience points. And it's like, this was designed around your character was made based on who you were. This also introduced a lot of the Daedric princes that we know. Hermaeus Mora was a potato lobster in this game.
Potato lobster. Yeah, Hermaeus Mora in this game is the source of all of our jokes, of him looking like what's his face?
Zoidberg.
Zoidberg, and he's this squiggly little lobster guy. Like,
And if you, that's actually Daggerfall is the GIF or GIF that I always post on Twitter with the swirling stars in the background and the green blob with the snappers. It is from Daggerfall. Similar model is used in Oblivion too, but it's
why not Hermaeus Mora?
Exactly.
Yeah. So my total experience playing Daggerfall was, I think it was about 6 months ago. I loaded it up on my computer, got it to run on my laptop. Just like, I'll just put it on the laptop to see if it works. Loaded into a dungeon, couldn't figure out how to swing my sword, and died. And then loaded it back up, made another character, you start in that beginner dungeon, ran into whatever it was, a spider or whatever it was, and then died again. And it took me something like 3 or 4 tries before I was like, you've got to be kidding. It can't be this hard to swing your freaking weapon. Am I attacking? And there's just no animation for it. Like, what is happening here? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, you actually click and drag across the screen to swipe your sword. I was like, yep. That's amazing. I didn't expect that from an MS-DOS game built in 1996. I kind of figured it would just be a button press. Or, or like, and there's a little interface at the bottom. I feel like, is it the swords? Do I click the swords button? Like, what? No, yeah. And even then, even after learning how to swing my sword, I didn't make it out of the dungeon after like another try or two. And then I was just like, yeah, I'll get back to this some other time. Just moved on.
So that's kind of the experience you get with some of the older ones where they are not streamlined and they're pretty aggressively rough to get. They just throw you right in with minimal explanation of what's happening. And they're like, yeah, you figure it out. You'll be fine. Most people weren't fine. They were dead. Right. But yeah. So we covered the kind of, the technical bits without getting super in detail because these are kind of an overview. A lot of the established lore that we started to get, and we've made references to some of them actually. Fragile Shark from chat brings up Ebonarm, which we had the episode on Ebonarm.
Yeah.
Stuff like that was kind of coming to fruition and formation in this game. And there were stories and lore being crafted, and it was a mix of which ones were kept and which ones were dumped and which ones were modified and all of this stuff. But Daggerfall really, to me, is where the series started to solidify what it has become over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the place where its own mythos kind of took hold.
Yes.
It went from being like the cheap knockoff of something else to really defining its own identity. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. From like 100%. A lore, story, history kind of standpoint. And it takes place in a very, specific region of a much larger map, even though that region is gigantic. It's, it's mostly in High Rock and the, Daggerfall region of the map.
Yes.
And
then wherever else you want to putz around in as well. But that's not like the focus. The other unique mechanics point that I figure is worth mentioning is the concept of timed quests in this game, which is pretty much wholly unique, I believe, unless I'm just forgetting, where you're given time frames to do things. Not everything, but a lot of quests have time frames like you kind of would in real life, where it's like, oh, my daughter was abducted by vampires. Go help her.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And then you can putz around doing whatever you want.
Right. But no, really, if you don't save her in the next day, she's going to be dead.
They're going to kill her. And then you just fail that quest because she's dead because they sucked her blood.
They weren't waiting for you to show up.
Yeah. Correct. Right. So this game played on its own moving world more than your fun time frame, which is, I'm assuming, going to be a little rough to get used to when I get to Daggerfall and playing through it, since a lot of it's figuring out where to go as well. And that looming clock is, I don't do well when I know there's a timer. So I feel like I'm going to get a lot of people killed when I try to play through that one.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is that the time frame of the late 90s was also the time frame that the Fallout franchise launched. And one of the things a lot of people don't realize is Fallout 1 also has time limitations. Not on the same extent of like, do this mission in this much time or you fail it, but more of like, once you enter into the game and start doing things, there's a certain time frame that goes by before the game ends, and you can actually delay that a little bit, but the game exists within a very specific time frame, and if you don't succeed in your main quest by the certain time, then you fail, and you get a certain ending, which is again very similar to some of these older DOS PC games had these kinds of things going on with them. And I think it's because they came from I think it has something to do with the idea of what tools you have as a programmer in a world where you don't have a lot of graphic interface and those kinds of things. You have tools, you have tools for like, I can roll damage stats. I can have, AC, I can have health. Well, what else is a tool? Well, you can move north, south, east, and west. What else is a tool? Time is a tool, and there's a clock on the PC that's ticking. Okay, well, what if I give you a time frame that you have to get from here to here in order to do a thing? That becomes a very easy limitation for a quest line. But in our modern concept of this, it doesn't make sense because I want the game world to focus on me and I don't want to be limited by what the game is telling me I can or can't do. So
it also, just based on scale, I would imagine when you have endings and possible outcomes based on these timers, whether you could complete it in time or not knowing that, because FAQs and guides and wikis weren't really a thing for these games. If you didn't go out and buy your Prima strategy guide, you kind of were blind. It would add a level of replayability because, well, if there's other endings, how can I earn the other endings? So you'll want to go back and do it again. So it gives extra legs to these games, which would normally be you play through it and you're done with it. It's like not so much when you've got stuff like that, because it requires you to perfect doing it in order to actually see the different endings. So most people probably aren't going to just jump in and ace their way right to the best ending. It's certainly possible, but not necessarily like how most people are going to experience it.
Yeah, makes sense. Sorry, I've got my eyes itchy. I don't know why.
Allergies.
Yeah, I guess. So the other thing about this is that the stories were basically came about in the quest dialogue. Is that correct?
Yes.
You meet an NPC. They say, here's a big page of text, blah, 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 blah. This is why you need you to go to do this thing. This is what I'll give you. And then you go do it. And then you come back and you get another big block of text.
Deal with it. Yeah. Numinium on the way. All those various things, which also, I guess, that is sort of a mechanic. Speaking of multiple paths, there are multiple endings to Daggerfall, all of which are considered canon.
Yeah, they're all canon. Yeah,
they're all canon, and as a result of the end of Daggerfall and how do we deal with multiple endings, that's where Dragon Breaks came from. As a interesting little tidbit, that was the MacGuffin that was created, was the Dragon Breaks fixed, quote unquote, their how can everything and nothing have happened at the same time.
Yeah. And do you know if Dragon Break is actually used in Daggerfall at all?
No, I don't believe.
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is, because I know that project was a little finished under duress from what I've seen, because there was some technical problems with the company and such. And I think they were just trying to go all out, from my understanding. If anybody knows, finer details, always feel free to shoot us a comment, and we're learning this stuff for fun. So that's kind of, but with some of the technical problems that they ran into and slow development caused certain things to change during development. From what my understanding is they just were going for broke. We need to make this the most all-encompassing, greatest thing that we could possibly conceive of, and hopefully people like it. And as a result, it was kind of interesting because that would include multiple endings. But if you're going to actually continue the series onward, well, how do you not just invalidate people's choices, which is a concern for Skyrim as well. But they already have this thing in place, which Dragon Breaks themselves, since they were, from my understanding, thought of, or it came about as a result of the multiple endings. I don't think they ever refer to a Dragon Break in Daggerfall itself. It was more of a post Daggerfall, how do we make this still
justification
work? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So to wrap up Daggerfall, there's two other things I want to point out. I think Daggerfall has both the most badass looking cover for the game, of any game in the series. The artwork for the cover is, if you guys haven't seen it, here I'll post. This is from the Wikipedia article. Go to the link there. Take a look at that picture. It's got the lich like reaching out. I mean, it looks so metal. It's like,
this will be a special thing just for the video people. Keep
sorry, just for the video people. So I feel like this, and they sell shirts of this too, and it's got the lich reaching out and the Daggerfall font that looks all really, really cool in the background. I don't know. There's something about the artwork in this one that looks really, really cool to me. Lotus is grabbing some stuff from the back of his room and coming back to the camera. Do you have a full-size box? Is that a full-size game box from back in the day?
The original holographic copy of Daggerfall. Reflects a little bit.
Yeah,
so
lean it down a little bit. Lean it down. It
Yep.
might, or just maybe a little bit more.
A little more.
Yeah, there you go. Now you can kind of see
Yep.
it. Yep, it's backwards on the screen. I can.
Yes, it's back.
It.
Yeah, the words are inverted, but that's the Underking Lich digging his way out, I believe. But yes, this is the. I actually have.
Man, that's back when video games came in these gigantic boxes. Those boxes were huge. That was so cool.
That so including, because it does actually have all of the stuff in it. I have, I guess, humble brag here. I have all of the copies of every Elder Scrolls game in their original bubble wrap and stuff like that form. This box with all of its contents probably weighs about 5 pounds. There is so much in this Daggerfall package. It is ridiculous.
Yeah, games back then used to come, for people who don't know, they would come with maps. They would come with trinkets and items. Sometimes you would buy a game and they'd come on these like 3.5-inch floppy disks. The floppy disks were this big. Like they're not big. But then the boxes were, I don't know, 10 times that size, and would come with all this stuff in them. The manuals, sometimes the manuals were like their own books. They were just they were huge.
Very much are.
Right.
Yes,
and the manuals would tell stories about the games and help you understand like what the world was that you're getting into and all that kind of stuff. They were like cloth maps, all sorts of really cool stuff. And it would make sense. You'd pay $50, $60 for something like this, but it would come with a ton of stuff in it. Yeah, it was really cool. The other thing I wanted to mention about Daggerfall is I think it might be the sexiest of the Elder Scrolls games, in that you end up with like, I mean, it's pixelated graphics, but there's like topless women, and there's like, it's I don't know. This was very
that was the case too,
adult.
But wait till we get to Battlespire.
Oh,
later.
Battlespire. All right. Well, Battlespire and Daggerfall have a lot of DNA in common.
They do.
Graphically.
Honestly, we'll stick with the numbered versions to go with, but Battlespire, I believe, was originally intended to be an expansion to Daggerfall, and it kind of spun into its own project because it is a very different game, like functionally, than Daggerfall is, but using a lot of the same overlays and things like that. Like it has a lot of, like you said, shared DNA, but the game itself is a dungeon crawler, not an open world game.
Not an open world RPG. Yeah.
Yeah. So
do we want to discuss that now? Does it make sense to do that one now because of the connection?
Because of the connection, I think maybe we should. Okay, so
this came out like 2 years afterwards, I believe.
Yes,
let me look at the details. So yeah, 96 was Daggerfall. 97, it was so September, November. It was only 1 year.
Okay,
it's like a year and a month later.
Yes, I believe the title is called An Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire.
Yes.
Okay, so Battlespire is not an open world game, as I just made reference to. Very pixelated as well, sprite graphics. It is a dungeon crawler, and it is a very large departure from anything else I've seen in the series. So when you start with Battlespire, you are crushed by word walls and explanations and just a deluge of information that on stream, I'm sure I looked like a deer in headlights because I was trying to click through screens and I felt like I was studying for an exam. There are so many systems in place, which is something it shares in common with Daggerfall, is all the systems are there. But it is how can I put this? other than just saying it is a dungeon crawler, it is divided into levels. I have found out how many. There are 7 levels in the Battlespire, and they are these weaving, interconnected nightmare maps.
Right. Okay.
Where you basically need to solve a myriad of things, find keys, and progress to the next level. And you get up through the Battlespire to fight Mehrunes Dagon because he is blowing up the Battlespire and murdering everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a level system very unlike the other thing. And also some of the definitions to things are also very different. They shift in and out of using magic and magicka. You will see a lot of, creatures that you're used to from the series, but your health bar is blue and your magicka bar is yellow in that game, which is very confusing.
Yeah.
So they had not determined a set that they really wanted to stick with yet. Stamina wasn't even a thing whatsoever. Instead of, I was told the reasoning for this, which I thought was very cool because I was incredibly confused originally. You don't have hit points in this game. You have wounds, which was very, very confusing because I was thinking originally when I was adding wounds that I was giving myself a disadvantage so that I could get points elsewhere. But then I realized the points weren't adding up. So you have a pool of points you're given at the start, and you can choose disabilities or advantages. And you basically mush your character around like that. There are pre-made classes. You can still make your own class, just like in the other games. But wounds relate to how many wounds can you take before you die. Mm-hmm. Which, when it was phrased like that, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's terrible not knowing that, because I was just like, what? However, there are a lot of role-playing attributes that you can use in my playthrough. I am incapable of using medium armor or weapons.
No weapons? You're all magic.
I am magic and fist fighting. That is all I can do.
All right. All right.
You level up your skills by using them yet again. And I was like, okay, I know this system. Mm-hmm. But you don't gain experience points that way. You only gain experience points by completing a floor of the Battlespire. Then you're allocated a certain amount of points that you can spend, and you can either level up skills, which I've learned very quickly makes 0 sense because your skills can level up based on using them. So I don't really even understand why it's an option. But your skills are capped by your governing attribute, which would be like my fist fighting. I can only level up so high as my strength exists. So I can't be a 69 in fist fighting if I'm only a 64 in strength. I cap at 64.
Gotcha.
So it becomes kind of an interweaving of, okay, what do I do to minimize the amount of abuse I need to take and maximize the amount of points that I can grow with? Normally, you learn skills and stuff like that. Throughout the game, you have your set to start with, and without extra influences, there are crystals on the ground and stuff like that, which could give you your health or magicka back. There's potions and stuff like that. Those all help. There are no merchants. That's not a thing in
money.
Battlespire.
It's not a money thing.
Right.
I'm sure there really isn't a quest. I mean, it's not an open world game where you take a quest and decide where to go. You just kind of progress forward. There's not like
you progress forward, and the game is got a very unique bit of voiceover, I guess would be the best way to try to explain what's in this game. You can, the higher your speech, the better you are at it, you can talk to pretty much, well, literally anything in the game, which is weird.
Like scamps,
scamps.
Yeah.
Yep. And this is where I will say, I will edit unlike my stream, which is always a surprise when we run into some of the things we do, it's not even so much innuendo in this game. They just hit on you, make overt sexual references. People just don't wear clothes. That it's just very, very weird. And there's a lot of attention to it. And earlier we found some pretty creepy aspects to it where I'm like, this is gross. Like, what is happening?
Oh man.
So yeah. So now I don't know whether it was just not accepted well or what, but yeah, it's definitely, I would say, the strangest so far by a mile.
Yeah. In doing research for this episode, there's a blog post on fiercepc.co.uk that lays out all the different games and gives an opinion on them. It talks about Battlespire here, and I want to quote this part. It says Battlespire doesn't have an open world. Instead, it has a closed level, and the merchants and currency are obliterated from the game mechanics. The new release also introduces a multiplayer mode to the players. Unfortunately, despite a spirited attempt to create curiosity and keep gamers engaged, Battlespire remains the least impressive addition to the franchise. So they have a very low opinion of this game.
So that's the other thing. This game has a kind of cult following, it seems like, and people have fun with it. And it actually does, as we made reference to earlier, it seems like it has some pretty strong tie-ins with potential to the current ESO season, where Morrowind's Dagon is running amok. But the coins, I don't think I have mine handy. Yes. So the little promo coins that we were sent out and stuff like that seem like they could potentially reference some of the clans, and you encounter all of these clans in the Battlespire because it's Morrowind's Dagon attacking the Battlespire. So again, it does seem to have tie-ins to other parts of lore, but the game itself is very, very different. Again, another similar issue to what was oddly a problem that seemed like procedural generation might have caused. This game is riddled with glitches. Now, maybe it's just because it's old, but from reports I've seen of other people reviewing it, the game has a lot of technical problems. I've encountered a lot. I like to abuse some of them to pass things sometimes.
Of course, right.
Creatures are very prone to injuring themselves, which is very handy because if you can cluster them together, they just blow themselves up. It is an interesting experience, but it is definitely very different than the other games I've played so far.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting take on that. It might be one that I'll dig into in the future. At some point, I want to at least poke around in these longer than just, die at the beginning and then start over.
Well, it also, to that reference point, I mean, it has a multiplayer. It's the first of them to have a multiplayer. When I beat it,
it's outside of other odd releases. I mean, Elder Scrolls Online is really the only one with multiplayer.
And there is, so there's also Elder Scrolls Legends, if you want to consider that, which is just the phone card game.
Right.
Or Blades. We're not going to really get too into those because we'll just be here tackling one thing after another.
Well,
5 episodes long.
Well, here's what I was thinking is we're most of the way through the episode already, and we've got Arena to cover still. Why don't we take a break? We'll do Arena, and then we can come back and talk an entire other episode about the other variations of the games, other weird games, the card game, how those games affect the lore. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in Legends that even affects the lore that you can draw stuff from. And I have to wonder if Blades is going to do the same thing, but that could be a fun conversation for next week. So why don't we do that? Why don't we go to the middle of the show? We'll thank our patrons, and we'll be back to talk about Arena.
The skies are marked with numberless sparks, each a fire, and every one a sign.
So thank you to all of our patrons. You guys help make sure that we can do this show every week, and you're the foundation of my ability to make this a full-time thing. So thank you very, 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 very much to each of you, and especially thank you to Noodle Al Dente, our tier 5 patron. Tier 5 patrons get called out every week. If you want to be called out on the show or show up on a future episode or get ad-free episodes of the show or all sorts of different things, go check out patreon.com/Elder Scrolls Lorecast. And even for just $1 a month, you can help support the show, support me and my ability to do this, and also get things like ad-free episodes and early episodes. So go check it out. There's lots of cool rewards there for you. And thank you again to all of our patrons.
Yes, you're entirely brilliant. Conquering madness and all that. Blah, 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 blah.
All right, so we've made it all the way back to the Elder Scrolls Arena, which is the very first game. This is March 25th, 1994. Yes. Where were you in March of 1994?
Grade school.
Yeah, I was 15 years old. I was in, what is that, 9th grade?
I was 10.
10th grade?
10 years old.
What was I playing in 94? In 94, I was playing Doom. I was playing Civilization, or Civ 2, maybe. I was playing my Super Nintendo. I was not playing Elder Scrolls Arena. I hadn't picked it up, but I was into other RPG games. I just didn't know about Elder Scrolls yet. So,
actually, one quick side thing I'm going to mention, just because I don't want people to have a fit yelling at their podcatchers or YouTube or whatever, just so you don't think we forgot. Shadow Key for the N-Gage, yes, it also has a multiplayer. Just to get that, just because I know somebody's going to mention it.
The N-Gage. All 10 people who owned an N-Gage could play that game together.
Yeah, correct. It had a co-op. Yes, that did exist. We'll deal with that later. But now that that's covered, it's funny you mentioned that you were playing Doom, because the art style of Arena is very Doom-like. Mm-hmm. It's big pixels. Up in honestly, it kind of looks like what Doom would be. I don't know if you ever played Hexen as well.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Or Heretic.
Oh yeah, totally.
It made me think very much of that, because it's like that had the more medieval vibe, and you had the melee weapons, and that was very much.
It was the 90s. It was like the 90s were all about like grisly imagery in games. Other than the Mario, like not the Mario side of it. By the mid 90s,
right?
The whole Sega thing had taken on, and video games had grown up for teenagers, and they weren't just for kids; they were for teenagers. And in order to make it things for teenagers, you had to have skeletons, and you had to kill Satan, and you had to, and this is like post Nirvana grunge. This is by the mid 90s, you were at these bands like Nine Inch Nails, and like music was getting darker, and gangster rap, and there were like everything was a little bit more serious and dark, and that's the world these games were in, and that's the teenagers that these games were trying to appeal to. We needed Doom Lorecast as Sea Chaser. That would last all of like 10 episodes, and then we'd have to find something else to talk about.
Just cover the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Sega's blast processing.
Yeah.
Yes, also super advanced.
Yeah, but like this idea of like blood and guts and gore in games was all the rage. Mortal Kombat and Doom and these guys. So it totally makes sense that they were going this direction. I was playing a series called Might and Magic, if any of you guys are familiar with that.
I've heard of it. Don't know about it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, those are the games like Arena that I was playing, because that's what my friends played. And so they would get a copy of the game and I'd be like, oh, that's cool. And then I would get a copy of the game and I'd play it. Had they been playing Elder Scrolls Arena, that's probably the one I would have been playing.
Yes. And Arena, so we're going to do more. Apologies to those of you who just listen to the audio version. I am one of those who does the audio versions, but bonus for those of you who happen to just be able to see the video, because we have props. Speaking of the grungy, gritty bits, so here is the Arena box, which has your gritty. I go a little higher. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
So
everybody is very, very covered in armor and weapons, except for the scantily clad woman in the bikini.
In the front. In the bikini, wielding a sword.
Because 90s. Yes.
So that is the cover that most people know. That's the original box art. This is also incredibly weird, and this is about as esoteric as it gets from a collecting standpoint. But there was actually a second cover to the game. There's two different color patterns to that box. I've got that one, which is the original. This is the French version of Arena, which was published by Ubisoft.
Wow. Times have changed.
It is not all super sexy. It is some strung out dude, probably on skooma, beating up a little troll dwarf.
Man, I don't know what that is. Yeah.
But yeah, so that this version was only in France. I'm not really sure why they had different cover art. I mean, I assume it has something to do with the fact that it was published by Ubisoft as opposed to Bethesda. They're small little, but just a neat little tidbit that there are technically 3, depending upon like the deluxe edition of the game, but basically there are 2 wholly unique book or covers to them. So here's another fun little addition. As of January 29th, 2020, there was an article on PC Gamer that I'm going to share. I'm pasting it into chat right now, where this could have been a potential other cover. Somebody put Garfield into the Elder Scrolls Arena as recently as just 2 months ago. Perfect.
And now the character creator has basically Garfield's head on top of the characters, which is a wonderful abomination.
Amazing.
I think if ever I play through this game, I'm going to have to use this mod. Anyway.
Love and hate it.
Anyway. Yeah.
Yes.
But so what could be more 90s than putting Garfield in the Elder Scrolls Arena?
Right in. So into the, details of Arena itself, Arena has a rather generic storyline, but it does give us the storyline to what eventually becomes like the basis for a lot with Uriel Septim. It is a little weird because, as we discussed in the Arena episode, specifically that they actually typo and put the wrong lineage number next to him.
There's a typo in the opening sequence.
Yes,
on 2 different pages.
Uriel the Fourth, which is a little weird. I've never figured out if there was something more that I'm missing, or if that's just. It seems like it's just straight up a typo because it's Uriel 7th.
This we noticed when you were streaming it. You were streaming it, and I jumped in your stream, and you started it up, and we're like watching the intro, right? Isn't this when we noticed?
Yes.
And I was like, wait a minute, didn't they just say Uriel the Fourth? These are different rulers, and you're like, well, no, maybe. And then we went to the next one. We're like, wait, no. They're talking about the same person. 7, but this one says 4. There's a typo right in the intro.
Yes. So again, storyline was still being ironed out, and it was a small team with a very small budget, it seemed like, but an ambitious game. And in this game, you are governed by leveling up just 2 experience points. You kill the thing, it gives you a set amount of experience points. You put your points into your governing attributes, the end. That is all there is to it. And it is, from what I understand, a form of D&D system, which I don't play D&D, so I was struggling a bit to learn it. I know some stuff.
Well, even you go back to 94, that would have been... second edition,
right?
Something like that.
Say,
I don't remember.
The other thing that I did not understand to start with, and chat lovingly helped me out with when we were struggling through, was that you have an armor class rating in this game, and the lower your armor class, the better protection you would get, which I did not understand what I was doing at the start. I was like, why are my numbers going down if I'm getting more durable? I don't understand. So yes. So you wanted low numbers on your defense and high numbers on your attack in order to actually do things properly.
Anything.
Yeah, which was an adjustment. Also, the game is notoriously difficult. The running joke is that most people who work at Bethesda have been unable to make it out of the first dungeon. It's interesting. It's very difficult and pretty punishing, as the main thing about this game is you have a lot of features that you're used to in Elder Scrolls games. You can rest and stuff, and things can interrupt your rest. And man, do they interrupt your rest. The enemy spawn rate in this game is outrageous. So you're just constantly under siege. The landmass is enormous. And from what I understand, the wilderness is procedurally generated, but the towns and their placement are not.
Yeah, that's what I understood too.
Yes. So just
right.
roaming around, you could bump into a random cave or whatever, and that'll just be whatever. But when you go to the Crystal Tower or Mirkwood or the Crypt of Hearts, whatever, Fang Lair, these are all designed to just, they were handcrafted. And there's no time limits in this game, which was a thing we had just mentioned in Daggerfall. This is a very straightforward CRPG. You are in first person, which is a little unique, and you have different skills, but it's kind of just you're in steal mode or not steal mode. Mm-hmm. That's it. You're using this weapon. You're using this one-handed weapon. You're using this weapon. It doesn't even matter if it's one-handed or not. You're using this weapon. You're using magic. Like, it's much more condensed, and it was fleshed out, and then kind of, it's almost like, it's been like a bell curve as to there's stuff here. It gets really complicated, and then they kind of streamline it again for ease of use later in the series a little bit. So
yeah.
It's why sometimes the dumbing down of the series I have a bit of an issue with, because I'm like, well, no, they just change stuff, and they're all very different. So
right. So I'm on the screen right now. I've pulled up the map from Arena, and you guys will find this very familiar. It is the entire continent of Tamriel, and with all the names that you're familiar with: High Rock, Hammerfell, Skyrim, Morrowind, Cyrodiil, Valenwood, Somerset Isle, Elsewhere, Black Marsh, and towns and things like that. And what's amazing about this to me is that there are changes. They've changed this a bit, but
they have.
But for the most part, that stuff is there.
Yes.
Even places like, here, check this out. Even places like Labyrinthian, which shows up in Skyrim. Like it is a
main quest location to find one of the 8 pieces of the Staff of Chaos. As a matter of fact, you have to specifically go to Labyrinthian.
Mm-hmm. And then you've got Dagoth-Ur, you've got Mournhold, you have a lot of these names of places are the same. Alinor over in Somerset, Daggerfall is there, Sentinel, Wayrest, Solitude, Dawnstar, like all of these names are there.
The bones of the series were constructed with Arena, and they never really threw out the bones that were there. The Earth Bones, if you will.
The Earth Bones. We now know what the Earth Bones actually are. It's
right. It was Arena.
It was Arena. It was the developers who did Arena. They were sacrificed on the pyre of Arena, and they now.
And as you know, as a result, it's kind of interesting that the basis was there, and they've built on that. And yes, a lot has changed over time, but you can always look back to things. There are just, like I've made reference to the Crypt of Hearts, Fang Lair, Halls of Colossus was the concept that they used as the location for the Elsewhere season. Obviously, Somerset was the Somerset expansion, even though it's spelt weird in Arena because it's Somerset, which is strange. But there's all the parts were there. It's just, you could tell that it almost like Arena was a draft board. This is what we want. Here's our starting point. And over games and time, it's filled itself in and ironed out some of the rough edges.
Right. Yeah, but it's really neat. like some of the names are clearly from other things, using the word like Colossus in a name, or Mirkwood.
Mirkwood, I actually was, I joked on stream. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's copyright infringement, and it's because it's apparently M-I-R-K in the Lord of the Rings. It's
Yeah.
M-U-R-K.
They're like, this is such a good name, we're going to use it. But but you know, other names are you know, like they hold, I don't know, hold water is, I don't know what the right phrase is, but you know, things like Dagoth is a very unique sounding name for something.
Right. Which
Whiterun, Solitude, Dawn
yeah.
Star, like that. These are cool sounding names.
Yep.
Daggerfall, like that's a cool name. Like they, you know, Sentinel, that's a cool name for a city. But and some of them sound like real world kinds of names that you would find in, say, European towns. Things like Firsthold or you know, Cloud Rest. You know, these kinds of names sound very Anglo-Saxon in ways. But then you have other names that, you know, Rimmen. What is a Rimmen?
What is a Rimmen? Yeah.
Right.
And actually, Red Mountain itself, I mean, there was always the thing. I was originally confused. I was like, I'm not sure I remember this. But then, so there is a place on Red Mountain, Daggerfall. In Arena, they seem to just refer to Red Mountain as Daggerfall, and then it's almost like it condensed down. And then obviously we get Daggerfall, the person, as well later on in the stories and stuff like that. But it's interesting because a lot of times you'll see bits and pieces, and they'll sometimes take on a different direction. The world of Tamriel is never referred to as the Arena ever again. Arena. And in Arena, they're like, oh, everything's so harsh and brutal. It's got the nickname the Arena. Yeah, that concept was just straight up dropped. Like that is not a thing. And it was based on the fact that originally the game was like an arena fighter, that they totally ditched that concept, and that's the history of Arena, not so much what we're talking about.
Which might actually explain why the enemy density is so high.
Sure. Yeah, just a shift in direction, but with, you know, remnants of a previous game still there.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting, but it is, I find this stuff fascinating because for a series that we love so much and that we all came into at different times and has developed and is so interesting in its own right, to see the evolution of it and to see what it is now compared to what it was. But some of the things change, some of the things don't. It's like watching a writer's revisions happen in real time, in a way. Like if you go back, and this is something that I did in college, I had all of Christopher Tolkien's books about how his father, J.R.R. Tolkien, wrote about the world of Middle Earth. And this is well beyond the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings. These were the books that pulled out his notes from different time periods of his life, and would talk about, like, oh, back in 1925 when he first came up with the concept of these god spirits, these were their names. But then 2 years later, he changed it to this for these reasons, and like all of this stuff. And I haven't retained a whole lot of the details, but what was amazing in looking back at that is that you end up with something very similar to this concept of, like, okay, we have this idea for a game. There's a map. These are the kinds of places. This is the kind of the spirit of the game, is that the world is kind of like this. There's these kinds of dangerous creatures. There's these kinds of heroes, and these kinds of events happen. And then you flesh it out, and you basically take a second stab at it. And you're like, okay, here's Daggerfall. This is a very specific location, but it's still huge map. You got these kinds of places. We're going to reuse some of the names and the locations, but now we're going to flesh it out a little bit more. And these monsters, there's more detail here. They're actually connected to something even more powerful and dangerous, and those are Daedra. And they're kind of like devils or demons, but they're not. They're different. They're from another plane. And then you get into something like Battlespire, and you're like, well, what if we go to that other plane and one of the Daedric lords attacks it? And then you have to, okay, we'll do that. Okay, well, what about this other place on the map called Morrowind, where all the Dark Elves live? Let's do a game about that. Now we've got to flesh out this lore that's now connecting into the actual metaphysics of the world and how the whole world is held together in this sense of how it works. And, you know, it just grows and grows and grows. But it's like going through somebody's journals about like, okay, this is going to be my first draft of this, but now I'm missing these details. Let's add these details in. Let's add these details in. And then by the time you get to something like Morrowind or Oblivion or Skyrim, you have a much more fleshed out world. And now you just have to tell the stories in it. The background's all there.
The other thing that's interesting is also the fact that it's not the same people who started that are necessarily still there, or
right.
Even from game to game, there are definitely people, that remain, but the writers change. So the direction of the story could change. The direction of the, world design change. This isn't one person's thoughts like J.R.R. Tolkien, a perfect example with Lord of the Rings. It was like that was his story. Same George R.R. Martin, even though he'll never finish anything.
Right.
He has his story. This is a conglomeration of many people kind of hive-minding together to make a full world that people can play around in, and it's interactable. So on top of that, it's not even a set path story. These games are about choice and doing what you want. So they just need to give you a structure to let you play around in, and they craft a story around as the players play.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we have this whole background and this whole understanding of the way the universe works, or at least what we think is the way the universe works. Right. But of course, nothing's canon unless it's in a game, and it explicitly shows up in a game. So everything's potentially going to change. Yep. So anyway, it turns into this wonderful thing that we have. Lotus, this has been great. I would love to get into some of these other ones. The weird offshoots are probably the ones, other than something like Legends or Blades, that I have the least amount of experience with. Like I didn't have an Engage, right? So
yeah,
I never played. I never played Redguard or any of the other weird ones.
Yeah. I guess next time we'll go with since Battlespire was kind of almost like a de facto expansion, so we kind of covered that one.
Yeah.
The weirdest spin-offs. Next time, I guess we will cover Shadowkey, Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, Blades, Legends, and Elder Scrolls Travels. So there were actually several Elder Scrolls Travels games. Yeah. Shadowkey being the most well-known, which is sad because that game is not well known. I will also make reference to Dawnstar and Stormhold, which are, I believe, JavaScript flip phone games.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, which I have the emulators on and will play through those as well.
That's great.
Yep. So those are our other spin-offs that will. Those are real spin-offy, and So
awesome. Well, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Right after this show, we have the Dungeons and Dragons Lorecast. So if you're interested in Dungeons and Dragons, we're talking more about the dungeons, or actually the dragons. We're talking more about the dragons part of Dungeons and Dragons, specific types of dragons and those kinds of things lately. And that'll be coming up at 10:30, so 20 minutes from now. So I'll keep the stream on. I'll put it on away for a few minutes after I leave, and then I'll be back for the Dungeons and Dragons show. Before I head out, though, Lotus, you have anything going on that you want to talk about? Anything you want to share?
Not specifically. If all goes well, we'll be recording another episode of Tales of Tamriel this Saturday. Sunday, I will most likely, if I can manage to piece it together, do another stream in preparation for. We have the big Elder Scrolls Online dungeon / overhaul of the champion point system coming this week to console. It's already there on PC. I hope you're enjoying it. I've heard good things.
Yeah.
I started a little bit on PC.
Yeah, I started respecing my character a little bit.
Yep, and I kind of did just to get an understanding of it. But next Tuesday, I will be, once I'm back from work, because day jobs and such, I will be streaming the new dungeons live on VET. On my own channel, Lotus of Doom on Twitch. So if you want to swing by and watch us get smashed around while we try to figure out what the hell we're doing, you're more than welcome. It's always fun to go through the new dungeons once they launch. And with the overhaul, I won't be as comfortable with my character, so I'll probably not be as good with it.
right? Good times.
But, yep, fun times.
Fun times. Yeah, and in similar notes, we have a regular Lorecasters PC event now on Friday nights. So we did our first one last Friday. We ran around, killed some world bosses, joked around with each other, had a really nice time. These happen Friday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. So most people, this is after work. You're welcome to come join me. I will be streaming it. So if you can't make it in game, you can always come hang out with us in the stream. We all meet up on the Discord, Robots Radio Discord. We all get in voice chat. We all run around in the game together and come up with wacky things to do. So sometimes it's going to be like, killing world bosses, and other times it's going to be like PvP stuff or fishing or wacky stuff like playing darts by throwing ourselves off a mountain. Who knows? We'll do all sorts of crazy fun things. Come join us for that tomorrow night. But that's what I've got going on. Thanks for joining me, Lotus. Super fun times.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And chat, thank you for being here. We will see you guys next week. And if you want to stay for Dungeons and Dragons, stay for that. We'll be back. I'll be back in like 15 minutes or so. See you guys in a little bit.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. If you have something you'd like to contribute to the show, please reach out to us at elderscrollslorecast@gmail.com or on Twitter @ESO Lorecast. I really appreciate you listening, and I'd love to hear from you soon.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.